The Halloween festival was always a special occasion in the small town of Millfield, where everyone eagerly participated in costume events and street parades. But that year, something strange happened that no one could explain. Sarah, a 25-year-old woman, had long loved the festival atmosphere and had always wanted to join this event with her friends. But that night, she disappeared. The annual festival scene was vibrant. Groups of friends in bizarre costumes were laughing and chatting. Shops were decorated with glowing candles and monstrous shapes. At 8 p.m., as the crowd began to gather at the city park, Sarah and her friends, Alex, Ben, Missy, and Lily, gathered at a corner to prepare for the parade. Sarah, dressed as a night goddess with a mysterious mask, happily conversed with her friends. She felt joyful. Nothing could disrupt the cheerful atmosphere. However, as the night fell and the music played in the distance, Sarah suddenly felt a strange sensation. A feeling as if someone was watching her. She glanced around but saw no one, just an unexplainable feeling. Suddenly, a strange man walked past, dressed in a bizarre costume with a completely covered mask and black attire. Sarah felt his gaze linger on her, even though he didn't speak. That feeling sent a chill down her spine, and when she turned to look again, the man had disappeared into the crowd. Sarah couldn't shake that strange sensation from her mind. She wanted to continue having fun with her friends, but she couldn't stop thinking about the man. Was it just my imagination? She wondered. However, as the lights illuminated her mask, an increasing sense of unease filled her. Sarah left her friends and walked into a quieter area of the festival, where dim lights flickered and the atmosphere felt eerie. Sarah walked into a secluded corner of the park, where the crowd was thinning. At first, she just wanted to find a quiet place to breathe, but as she ventured deeper into the area, the atmosphere began to change. Everything became eerily silent. The laughter and background music of the festival faded and were replaced by a heavy silence. She tried not to let her unease affect her, but the overwhelming stillness made her feel even more lost. She looked around and noticed strange shapes in the shadows, but when she approached them, there was no one there. The streetlights flickered, unable to fully illuminate the dark space ahead. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind made Sarah shiver. She quickly adjusted her jacket and kept walking when, out of nowhere, a soft voice came from behind her. "Hello, Sarah?" Sarah turned around, but saw no one. She stood still, trying to determine the source of the voice. Only silence and darkness surrounded her. The strange feeling grew stronger, and Sarah felt like she was being watched, even though there was no one around. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. But when she started to turn back to return to her friends, a light from behind her began to flicker. Sarah quickly turned around, and immediately, the light went out, leaving an all-encompassing darkness. She felt an invisible presence, as if someone was standing right behind her. Sarah stood still in the darkness, feeling a cold gust of wind make her shiver. She tried to stay calm and find her way back to her friends. However, when she turned around, the path she had walked on earlier had completely vanished. All that surrounded her now was dense darkness and strange noises echoing through the space. Everything felt unreal. She wanted to shout for her friends, but her voice was swallowed by the silence. The feeling of helplessness and fear grew stronger. She turned around and started walking, hoping to find an exit, but it was futile. Every time she thought she had found a path, it led her to a new road, a space that grew even more strange. Everything around her was darkness, with no signs of human life. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the darkness. It was a woman wearing a long black cloak, her face obscured entirely by a mask. The woman stood motionless, staring at Sarah with glowing eyes. Sarah felt a chill rise within her. Sarah couldn't move. Despite the fear, her eyes couldn't look away from the woman. "What are you doing here?" Sarah finally spoke, her voice trembling. The woman didn't respond, just stood there, her gaze mysterious. She began to walk toward Sarah, each step making strange noises. The footsteps didn't sound human, as if something unnatural was happening. Sarah felt like she was facing something she couldn't explain. With each step the woman took, Sarah felt herself sinking deeper into the darkness of this world. As the woman got closer, something unbelievable happened. She slowly removed her black mask, and the face that Sarah saw was not human. The woman's face was hollow, with no eyes, no mouth, only a deep, dark hole. Sarah screamed, but her scream shattered into the silence. The woman moved closer, her long fingers, like claws, gently touching her skin. Sarah couldn't move. The fear had paralyzed her. The strange woman moved closer. Her long, claw-like fingers reached out slowly, as if she wanted to touch Sarah. A cold chill rose within Sarah, and she felt trapped in the shadow of the woman. Sarah could feel her breath against her face, but couldn't make out her features. There was only emptiness. No eyes. No expression. "Why are you here?" Sarah stuttered. But the woman said nothing. Instead, she kept moving closer, her hollow eyes never leaving Sarah. Sarah began to feel like she couldn't breathe, as if the air around her was becoming suffocating and worse. She tried to move, but her legs felt frozen, unable to take a step. The footsteps of the woman echoed, growing closer, and Sarah could do nothing but watch. Suddenly, the woman stopped right in front of her. A cold breeze blew through, making Sarah shrink. The woman bent down, and Sarah felt a chilling breath, almost unbearable. "You can't leave, Sarah," the woman said in a whisper, as if casting a curse. Sarah felt her entire body stiffen, panic rising within her. She didn't know what was happening, but her fear only grew. The feeling of being lost and trapped in an endless space was indescribable. She tried to look around, but all she saw was darkness and blurry shadows. Before she could understand what was happening, she heard the strange voice again from behind, an ancient voice that seemed to have existed for a long time. Sarah turned around, but only saw a figure standing right behind her. The figure didn't move, just stood still, staring at her with hollow eyes. "You won't escape," the figure whispered. Sarah felt trapped in an endless spiral, unable to break free. Everything seemed to have come back, but not as real, only as a shadow of herself. She began to feel dizzy, unable to comprehend what was happening, only the feeling of endless fear remaining. In a moment of despair, Sarah heard laughter from a distance. It echoed like it wasn't coming from one person, but from the very space around her. She tried to move, but couldn't escape this strange space. The laughter grew louder, echoing in her mind, as if thousands of people were watching her. She turned around and realized the darkness was closing in around her. Everything began to blur, and a strange feeling rose within her, as if she was stepping into another world. Suddenly, everything around her changed. She felt an invisible force pulling her forward, like a nightmare. Everything became blurry, and Sarah couldn't comprehend what was happening. She tried to run, but her legs felt like they were glued to the ground. Just then, she noticed a small door ahead. This door was faint, not a regular exit, but more like a portal to another world. She rushed toward it, hoping to escape, but the door kept moving farther away. Sarah felt her strength slowly draining away. She began to feel like she was losing control of her steps. That faint door kept moving farther away, no matter how hard she tried to get closer. Everything around her was darkness, with no trace of the world she once knew. Each step Sarah took seemed to pull her deeper into an endless nightmare. The laughter echoed behind her, preventing her from finding any peace. Sarah turned around, but there was no one, just darkness and the laughter still ringing in her ears. Finally, Sarah could no longer run. She collapsed, exhausted and terrified. She looked around and noticed a faint light in the distance. The light began to grow brighter, as if it was calling her. Sarah got to her feet, the last bit of strength rising within her as she started to walk toward the light. But with every step closer to the light, she felt more lost, as if the light was leading her into another world, one with no escape. The feeling grew stronger, and Sarah began to doubt whether the light was truly an exit or just an illusion. Sarah kept walking toward the light, but as she got closer, the light faded and disappeared. She stood there, confused, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, a figure appeared before her. A man dressed in an eerie costume, with a mask covering his entire face. He didn't move, just stood there, staring at Sarah coldly. "You won't escape," he said, his voice soft but chilling. Sarah felt as if something dangerous was approaching. Sarah took a step back, not understanding what was happening. The man remained still, not saying anything further. She stared at the mask, feeling as though everything around her was closing in. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The man's cold gaze seemed to hold her in place, not allowing her to leave. "You are part of this festival," the man said, his voice sounding strange. "This festival is not just for fun. It has another purpose, a purpose you have never understood." The man finally walked up to Sarah and removed his mask, revealing a face that was not human. His eyes were hollow and expressionless, only a frightening shade of grayish black. "You can't escape this place. You've been chosen," he said. Sarah couldn't speak, only feeling a sharp pain spreading through her body. She didn't understand. She didn't understand why she was caught in this strange world. Nothing seemed real anymore, just an endless nightmare that she couldn't wake from. Sarah felt her consciousness fading. The dark shadow engulfed her, no longer a real space. The man's words echoed in her mind. You will remain here forever, becoming a part of this festival. As everything began to fade, Sarah realized she was no longer in the world she once knew. She had been pulled into another realm, where time didn't exist, and there was no escape. Sarah felt her body losing all strength. She couldn't move, only the shadows around her, strange figures appearing and disappearing. Her reasoning began to fade, while the man's words echoed in her mind. You will remain here forever, a part of this festival. The shapes around her grew more and more blurry, as if they weren't human, but soulless ghosts, wandering aimlessly in the dark. Sarah felt like she was a part of a nightmare she could never wake from. The space grew darker and stranger than ever. Everything seemed to be spinning, and Sarah couldn't tell what was real and what was an illusion. A strong sensation arose within her that she would never leave this place. This Halloween festival was not just an event, it was a trap, an endless loop pulling souls in. You are a part of this festival, the man whispered into Sarah's ear, his voice growing more ominous and cold. You will always be a part of it, never able to leave. Sarah wanted to say something, to scream, but she couldn't. She could utter nothing but absolute silence. She began to understand that she had been pulled into another world, a world with no escape, where lost souls would forever be trapped. The laughter and voices of those who had vanished echoed around her. Sarah could no longer perceive time passing. She didn't know how long she had been standing there, only that she couldn't escape. Eventually, darkness completely engulfed Sarah. The Halloween festival was no longer a joyful event, but an eternal curse. Those lost in it would never return. Forever. The Halloween festival in Millfield would never be the same again. The name Sarah, and those who had attended the festival that night, slowly faded from memory. Strange winds still swept through the empty streets, carrying the whispers of souls trapped in the invisible world. The festival continued year after year, but each year, another person would disappear, and the lost souls would never return. Every year, the Halloween festival in Oakville draws thousands of people. Crowds flood the streets, dressed in bizarre costumes and surrounded by haunted houses. But this year, the festival would be unlike any other. Emily, a 23-year-old girl with a passion for costumes, had planned to attend the biggest costume festival of the year with her close friends. She, along with Chloe, Jake, and Ethan, had prepared for this night for weeks. However, something strange happened that night that no one could explain. It was Emily's disappearance. She vanished in the middle of the crowd, with no trace and no message. The festival had started at 6 p.m., with a lively and bustling atmosphere. People chatted, played games, and enjoyed the activities. While dark clouds loomed in the distance, Emily and her friends were standing near the costume contest area, laughing and joking around. However, suddenly, Emily felt a strange sensation. A cold gust of wind swept through, and for a brief moment, she saw a strange figure standing silently in the distance. Emily thought it might just be the flickering lights playing tricks on her. But the feeling of unease wouldn't leave her mind. She turned to call her friends, but when she looked back, the figure had vanished. After a while, Emily decided to separate from her friends, to take a walk around. Though still feeling watched, she wanted to reclaim the festive atmosphere she had always loved. However, when she walked through the quiet park area, the lights suddenly went out, and Emily once again felt the presence of something strange, a feeling that someone was watching her from afar. She quickened her pace, but her footsteps no longer echoed as usual, instead being swallowed by the eerie silence of the area around her. Suddenly, a whisper echoed from somewhere. "Don't go any further." Sarah stopped, turned around. But when she looked around, no one was there. She stood in the quiet area, the dim light from the lamps casting faint shadows. Suddenly, she heard footsteps again. But this time, the steps were unclear, almost inhuman. Sarah felt as though she was facing something unnatural and unexplainable. She began to feel dizzy and disoriented. When she turned back to look for her friends, she realized that they had completely vanished, leaving only silence and an unsettling feeling. As Sarah hurried to search for her friends, she unexpectedly noticed a large door that appeared suddenly in the dark. She didn't know why, but she was drawn toward it, and as she got closer, the door opened automatically. A strange feeling compelled her to step inside, despite the fear building inside her. The moment she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her. She turned around, but there was no way to open it again. She felt as though she was trapped in another space, one with no way out. Sarah stood frozen in front of the door. She couldn't explain why she had been drawn to it, but now she had no other choice but to step through. As she placed her hand on the door, a cold, almost freezing sensation spread through her body. With a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open and stepped inside. Instantly, the door slammed shut behind her. She turned around, but there was no trace of the door, only a wall that looked strangely out of place. She swallowed nervously, the fear consuming her. The space around her was blurry, with dim light from lamps casting shadows on cold marble walls. Sarah began walking, her trembling hand brushing against the cold stone walls around her. Each step made her feel like she was sinking deeper into an endless space. This place seemed to have no end, no way out, and the silence was so profound it made her feel like she was being watched. She felt an inexplicable presence, as if an invisible force was overseeing every step she took. She stopped and heard footsteps echoing behind her, even though she knew she was alone. She turned around, but there was nothing. The fear surged again, leaving nothing but the heavy silence. Sarah continued walking in the pitch-black space, unsure of how long she had been walking. Each step seemed to pull her deeper into a bottomless pit. With no way out, suddenly, she sensed a strange shift in the atmosphere. She heard murmurs rising from the darkness, sounds that weren't clear, but felt too close. She stopped and looked around, but all she saw was dense darkness. As she took another step, a shadowy figure appeared before her, a man dressed in an eerie costume, his face hidden behind a mask. The man didn't move. He just stood there, saying nothing. A cold sensation rose in Sarah's heart as she realized that she was facing something unexplainable. "You can't leave," the man said, his voice dark and cold. "You are part of this festival now, and you must pay the price. Sarah felt her legs weaken, and the blurry images around her began to spin. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. She felt as though she was held back by an invisible force. Sarah felt her body being pulled away in the undefined space. The shadowy figures around her seemed to recede, creating a path. Sarah couldn't resist. Her heart filled with fear. She stepped into that blurry path, where nothing seemed real, only darkness and blurry images. A door opened before her, and she stepped through, though she didn't know where it would lead. As she entered, everything around her suddenly changed, as if she had stepped into another world. Sarah stepped through the door and immediately felt a strange shift. The space around her was unlike anything she had ever known. The marble walls disappeared, replaced by vast fields, shrouded in thick fog. She saw blurry figures floating in midair, as if they had no weight, no purpose, simply existing in a void. Sarah began to feel a new tension, as if she had wandered into another world, where time no longer mattered. She walked forward, but everything seemed to become blurrier, and she couldn't tell what was real and what was an illusion. The deeper she went into this world, the more Sarah realized there was no way out. She had wandered into a space where everything was invisible, except for the bizarre images surrounding her. Soulless figures stared at her, but no one spoke a word. Sarah walked forward, confused, unsure if she was dreaming or truly experiencing something supernatural. Suddenly, a voice echoed in her head. "You cannot leave anymore. You are part of this place." Sarah collapsed, cold sweat pouring from her, her body trembling. She now realized she was no longer in her own world. While Sarah sat there, desperate and confused, a figure approached her. It was a man, dressed like one of the Halloween participants. But his face was unrecognizable. The man stood before her, his eyes glowing in the darkness. "You are one of us now," he said, his voice deep and eerie. Sarah wanted to resist, to scream, but she couldn't. An invisible force had silenced her, leaving her unable to move. She realized she wasn't just lost in this space. She had become a part of it. The man smiled, but there was no emotion in his face. "You chose to participate in this festival, but you cannot escape." At that moment, dozens of other figures emerged from the darkness. They were all dressed in eerie costumes, as though they too had become a part of this costume festival. Sarah felt her heart race, her eyes widening in terror as she realized she was surrounded by lost souls, people who had wandered in and could never leave. She couldn't speak, only feel the horror that consumed her. Everything became clear to Sarah. She wasn't just trapped in a haunted space, but she was faced with the terrifying truth that she had become a part of this festival. The souls around her could no longer return to the real world. They were forever stuck in an endless cycle, like ghosts unable to escape. A sense of gloom spread through Sarah's body. She couldn't escape, couldn't run. Only an eternal wait in a world that would never have an exit. Once again, Sarah felt the presence of something in the shadows. Another figure, strange and terrifying, began to appear. It slowly stepped out from the darkness, a ghostly shape with a faded face, leaving only a faint light. She knew it was another soul pulled into this vortex. The ghost approached, and Sarah heard a familiar voice. "Hello, Emily." It was the voice of her missing friend. Emily was still here, but she was no longer human. Sarah stood motionless in the darkness, looking at Emily, her missing friend. Now nothing but a soul trapped in this place. Emily was no longer a person, no longer the friend Sarah had cherished, but a part of this eerie world. "Why is this happening?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Emily only looked at her, her eyes empty, yet full of understanding. "You chose to participate in this festival," Emily whispered, "and now you've become a part of it, just like the others." Sarah felt like she was trapped in an eternal nightmare, one with no way out, surrounded only by souls unable to escape. Suddenly, a strange feeling overwhelmed Sarah, and she felt like everything had changed. The festival wasn't just an event, but a loop of souls, where every participant got pulled in. Unable to escape, the figures around her had become part of the festival, and now Sarah realized that she was not the only one trapped. These souls had been part of the festival for a long time, and now they couldn't remember who they were. They were left in an endless cycle, forever, without an escape. Sarah stood in the darkness, a sense of emptiness consuming her. She looked at the souls around her, all of them just like her, people who had vanished, pulled into a world they couldn't understand. A feeling of despair rose within Sarah as she realized that she had become a part of this strange festival. This world had no exit, no salvation, and Sarah knew that she would have to live in an endless cycle of obsession and loneliness. "You chose this path," a voice echoed from the darkness, the voice of the man she had met before. "You will never leave again." Eventually, Sarah felt her own presence fading away. She was no longer human, but a soul trapped in the endless loop of the festival. This Halloween festival, with its ghosts that could never escape, had become a place that eternally buried lost souls. There was no tomorrow, no return. Everything around Sarah was blurry and cold, as if she was sinking into an endless darkness, unable to wake up, unable to escape. And with a sigh, Sarah became a permanent part of the festival.